I'm going to tell you exactly what my own son said to me, and then what I did. You decide who was wrong. We were standing in his future mother-in-law's kitchen, Felicity Hargrove's kitchen, 11 feet of quartz island, a refrigerator that chimes when you open it like it's announcing a queen. And he would not look at me when he said it. That's how I knew he believed it. Cowards look away from the truth they're telling. Mom, it's a big wedding. People are flying in. I had a dish towel in my hands. I remember that, because I folded it in half and then in half again, the way you do when your hands need something to do, besides what they want to do, which was reach across that island and shake him the way I did when he was 4 and ran into the road after a soccer ball. I did not shake him. I folded the towel. Felicity was the one who said the actual words. She said them gently, the way people say cruel things when they want credit for kindness. Harriet, we just don't want anything that reads as homestyle. This is a 500-guest affair. We've brought in real catering. Real catering. I want you to sit with those 2 words, the way I had to. Because I run a company with 41 employees, 3 commercial kitchens, and a client list that includes 2 sitting senators and a former Secretary of Commerce who once told a reporter from Southern Living that my brown butter scallops were the reason he stayed in Charleston an extra night. I have been doing real catering since before Felicity Hargrove knew what a charcuterie board was. I just hadn't told her my name. Here is what nobody in that kitchen knew, standing there in their cashmere and their good intentions wrapped around a knife. The caterer they had hired, the one they'd been bragging about for 6 weeks, the one whose name they dropped at every shower and golf outing like a verified credential, was mine. Vinson Provisions, booked 4 months before they knew I existed as anything other than the groom's mother, the widow, the woman who showed up to Thanksgiving with a casserole nobody asked her to bring. I'm going to tell you how that happened. I'm going to tell you what I did with what I knew. And I am going to tell you, because you've earned it by staying this long, exactly what was on the menu the night they found out. But we start in my kitchen, the one in Beaufort, the one with the linoleum from 1987, and the oven that runs 11 degrees hot, because I never bothered to fix it. I baked my best bread in that heat my whole life. I wasn't about to let it humble me now. My name is Harriet Vinson. I am 68 years old. I have buried 1 husband, raised 1 son, and built 1 company from a rented commercial kitchen above a defunct dry cleaners on Carteret Street. And I am going to tell you what happens when the people who love you confuse the size of your voice with the size of your power. It is not the story you think. Stay with me. There's a card I'm holding. I'm not playing it yet. My husband, Walt, died in March of 2019 on a Tuesday, with his hand still warm in mine for 11 minutes after the machine stopped saying anything useful. He'd built our kitchen table himself, the spring of 2004, out of white oak he'd salvaged from a barn collapse out past Yemassee, and he sanded it for 3 weekends because he said oak holds a grudge if you rush it. I still eat breakfast at that table every morning. Just me now. The chair across from mine has a worn patch on the seat where he used to lean back and laugh, and I have never had it reupholstered. And I am not going to explain why, because some things you just keep. Walt used to say I could season a room, not just a dish. He meant I knew how to read what people needed before they said it. It's a gift. Do you want to call grief and pattern recognition a gift? I built a company on it. Vinson Provisions started in 2009 with $4,000 of severance from a hospital cafeteria job and a single rented kitchen above what used to be coastal cleaners. I did baby showers first, then a rehearsal dinner for a judge's daughter who liked my she-crab soup so much she cried into the bowl, actual tears, salt water into broth, and told everyone at that table it was the finest thing she'd eaten since her grandmother passed. The judge's daughter is now Charleston's top wedding planner. Her name is Renata Cho, and she has booked Vinson Provisions for 43 events this year alone. I tell you this not to boast. I tell you this because it matters later, and because right now, you only know me as somebody's mother, standing in a kitchen with a dish towel, being told my food might embarrass somebody. My son's name is Dean. He is 31. He has Walt's hands. Square, sure, good for fixing things. And my mother's stubbornness, which has skipped me entirely and landed on him like a family curse nobody wants to claim. Dean got engaged to a young woman named Charlotte Hargrove in October. Charlotte is lovely. I want to say that clearly, because everything that follows is not about her. She has her father's quiet eyes and her mother's spine, though she hasn't learned yet which parts of that spine to use against whom. Felicity Hargrove is Charlotte's mother. Felicity wears her wealth the way some women wear perfume, applied with intention, reapplied throughout the day, and detectable from across a room whether you wanted to notice it or not. She built nothing herself, as far as I can tell. She married into the Hargrove name and the Hargrove construction fortune, and she has spent the 11 years since her husband Thomas died running his money, like it's a recipe she's still learning, all instinct and no measuring spoons. I do not say that with malice. I say it because it's the truth, and the truth, in my experience, eventually does the work cruelty tries to do faster and worse. The engagement dinner was at the Hargrove House on Trad Street, a 4-story single house with a piazza that catches the harbor breeze in a way that makes you forgive the city for everything else. I brought a pound cake, my mother's recipe, the one with the cream cheese folded in twice, the one that takes 90 minutes and makes the whole house smell like vanilla and butter, and something underneath that, almost like toasted bread. Felicity took one bite, standing in her own kitchen, and said, "Oh, this is so sweet, so homemade." She said homemade the way you'd say, "I see," to a child who just explained their crayon drawing was actually a horse. I said thank you. I am very good at saying thank you when I mean something else entirely. That was October. The wedding was set for June. And somewhere in between those 2 months, I made a phone call that nobody in that family knew I made, to a planner I'd known for 11 years, about an event I didn't yet know was my own son's wedding. Renata called me on a Wednesday in November. I remember because Wednesdays are inventory days at the Ashley River kitchen, and I had flour on my hands when my phone buzzed against the steel counter, rattling like it had something urgent to say. "Harriet, I've got a 500-guest June wedding, Charleston society family, big budget, very particular mother of the groom. You free?" I said I'd need details. She sent them that night. The groom's name was Dean Vinson. I sat at my kitchen table, Walt's table, the oak that holds a grudge, for a long time before I answered her. Long enough for my coffee to go cold, that specific kind of cold, where the surface goes flat and still, no more steam curling off it, just liquid sitting there, waiting on you to decide something. Here is what you need to understand about me, because it will explain everything that comes after. I did not take that contract to deceive anyone. I took it because Renata didn't know Dean was my son. He goes by Dean Caraway professionally, his stepfather's name from my second marriage, the one that lasted 4 years and ended quietly and amicably enough that Dean kept the name because he liked how it sounded on a business card, and because the booking was already moving before I fully understood whose wedding it was, and because, and I want to be honest with you, the way I'd want someone honest with me, because some small, unkind part of me wanted to see what would happen if I just let it unfold. I am not proud of that part. I am also not going to pretend it wasn't there. I confirmed the contract under Vincent Provisions on November 14th. Deposit paid December 2nd. I have the wire transfer confirmation saved, the way I save everything, in a folder on my desktop labeled, simply, Hargrove Vinson June. The family found out about Dean and Charlotte's engagement around the same time, more or less. By the time Felicity was hosting that pound cake dinner on Trad Street, telling me my baking was so homemade, I was already 4 weeks into menu planning for the reception that would follow her son's wedding. Except I didn't know yet it was the same wedding. Not for certain. I found out for certain on December 19th, when Renata sent the seating chart for review, and I saw the names, Dean Caraway and Charlotte Hargrove, head table, flanked by Felicity Hargrove, and there it was. Third line down, under family of the groom, Harriet Vinson, mother of the groom. My own name. On a chart I was catering, listed as a guest. I sat very still for a moment. Then I picked up my phone and texted Renata, "Quick question on this seating chart. Can you confirm the groom's mother's name spelled correctly? Just want to be sure before final print." She wrote back, "Already confirmed with the family direct. You're all set. Why, everything okay on your end?" "Everything's fine," I wrote, "just being careful. I have built a company on being careful." It was, I think, the first true sentence I'd told anyone in weeks. I should tell you what happens at the reception because I think you've earned a glimpse before we go back and walk through how we got there. In June, under string lights strung across the Hargroves harbor-facing lawn, I will stand at the edge of a tent in a black caterer's jacket, with my hair pinned back, mostly invisible to 250 people who have known me for years and will not recognize me in this light, in this role, in this silence. Felicity Hargrove will lift a fork of she-crab soup to her lips, the same recipe that once made a judge's daughter cry, and she will turn to a table of her oldest friends and say loud enough to carry over the band, "This caterer is extraordinary. Best money we've ever spent. Whoever she is, she should be running restaurants." She will not know she is 12 feet from the woman who made it. She will not know that the woman is wearing the same black jacket she wears to every event, the one with Vincent embroidered small and quiet over the left breast, facing away from the candlelight so the letters don't catch. I will watch her praise my food to people who once watched her dismiss it in her own kitchen. I will not smile, not yet. But that comes later. Let's go back. Let's walk through it properly, the way it actually happened, because the order matters. Everything in my life that's worth telling you matters in the order it happened. January brought the first real test, and it came in the form of a phone call I almost didn't answer. Dean called me on a Sunday evening. I was at the table going over a quote for a corporate gala. 800 guests, raw bar, a budget that would have made Walt whistle through his teeth. And I picked up because it was Dean, and you always pick up for Dean, even when some tired, knowing part of you suspects what's coming. "Mom, can we talk about the wedding?" "Of course, baby." I still call him that. 31 years old, 6'1", and I still call him baby, because some habits are load-bearing. It's about the reception. Felicity's been really stressed about logistics. There's a lot of moving parts with 500 people. I said I understood. I did understand. I have run logistics for crowds twice that size. She wants to keep the family's role really simple, like she wants you to just enjoy the day, be a guest, not worry about food or favors or any of that. There it was, gentle as a hand placed flat against your chest, pushing you backward 1 inch at a time until you're standing in the hallway and the door's already shut. Did you tell her I might want to contribute something? Maybe just the rehearsal dinner? Mom. His voice did the thing it does when he's bracing himself, that small downward dip, like he's apologizing before he's even said the sentence. She already booked someone, some really high-end place. I think it's better if we just let the professionals handle it. The professionals. I held the phone a little tighter, not enough that he'd hear it, just enough that my knuckles knew. Of course, I said, whatever's easiest. I did not tell him the professionals were me. I want to be honest about why. Part of it, the larger part, if I'm being fair to myself, was that Renata's confidentiality clauses are standard, ironclad, and not mine to break, without risking 43 other clients who trust me to keep their business quiet. Part of it was that I genuinely did not yet know how this would unfold, and some things you let unfold before you decide how to stand in them. And part of it, the smaller, harder part, was this. I wanted to know what my son would say about me when he thought I had nothing to do with it. That's not kindness. I won't dress it up as kindness. But grief teaches you things about yourself you don't always like, and one of the things mine taught me is that silence, held carefully, tells you more about people than any question ever will. So I stayed quiet, and in February, I found out exactly what silence buys you. The dress fitting was Felicity's idea. All the women in the family together, and I want to tell you about the specific sound the dressing room door made at Vivienne's Bridal on King Street, because I think about it more than I think about almost anything else from that week. It clicked. Not slammed. Clicked, soft and final, the kind of sound a door makes when somebody closes it gently on purpose, which is somehow worse than a slam. I was on the wrong side of it for 11 minutes. Felicity, Charlotte, and Felicity's sister Marguerite were inside with the seamstress, and I was in the hallway with a paper cup of champagne nobody had thought to refill, listening to laughter I wasn't part of, when Felicity's voice came clear enough through the door that I know she either forgot I could hear or didn't care. Just think Harriet means well, but can you imagine if she tried to do the food? Some sweet tea and pimento cheese situation at a 500-person wedding? It would be, I don't even want to say embarrassing, but Marguerite laughed, not unkindly, just easily, the way you laugh at something that's been pre-approved as funny. She's sweet, Felicity went on. She really is. But this is Charlotte's day. We brought in real catering for a reason. There it was again. Real catering. I did not open the door. I did not make a sound. I sat in a velvet chair clearly purchased for exactly this purpose. For the women waiting their turn. Waiting their relevance. And I finished a champagne that had gone flat and warm in my hand, and I thought about Walt's table, and the worn patch on his chair, and how he used to say the people who talk loudest about what you can't do have usually never once watched you do it. When the door finally opened, I stood, and I smiled, and I told Charlotte her dress was the most beautiful thing I'd seen in years. That part was true. I don't lie about dresses. I lie about very little, actually, which is going to become relevant. Felicity touched my arm on the way out, the kind of touch that announces itself, performs itself for anyone watching, and said, "Harriet, you've been such a good sport about all this." A good sport. I had a contract in my email inbox at that exact moment, signed 11 weeks earlier, for the catering of that exact wedding worth $94,000 with my company's name on every line. I said, I try to be. I want to pause here and talk to you directly, because I think you need to hear this the way I needed someone to say it to me 20 years ago, back when Walt's first cancer scare had me lying awake doing math on hospital bills at 3 a.m. There is a particular kind of grief that doesn't come from death. It comes from being underestimated by the people who are supposed to know you best. It is quieter than the other kind. Nobody sends a casserole for it. Nobody asks how you're holding up. You just carry it, folded small, the way I folded that dish towel, and you go on setting the table for people who think the table is the only thing you know how to build. If you've felt that, and I suspect, if you're still here, you have. I am not going to tell you to forgive it, and I am not going to tell you to burn it down out of spite. I am going to tell you what I actually did, which was neither of those things. It was something slower, something with a paper trail. Stay with me. We're getting there. March brought the act that turned the feeling into something I could hold in my hand. It happened at a planning meeting at Renata's office on Broad Street, a meeting I was invited to, finally, in my capacity as mother of the groom, to go over family-facing details, the rehearsal dinner location, the welcome bags, the seating chart I'd already memorized down to the table numbers. I sat at the far end of a long conference table. Renata sat at the head, a binder open in front of her, professional and warm in the way she's always been with me, though that day she didn't know she was being warm to two different people inhabiting the same chair. Felicity sat across from me, scrolling through something on her phone, and Charlotte sat between us, looking like a woman who had learned to make herself small in rooms where her mother and her future mother-in-law occupied the same air. "Let's talk catering," Renata said, flipping a tab in her binder. "I want to confirm final headcount with Vincent Provisions by next week, so we can lock the kitchen schedule." Felicity looked up from her phone. "Vincent," she repeated, and there was a half second. I watched it happen, watched the gears turn behind her eyes. Were the name almost connected to something? Almost. "That's the caterer's name?" she asked. "I thought it was something French. Didn't the website say something French?" "The chef owner's name is Harriet Vincent," Renata said, scanning her notes. "She's been doing Charleston Society events for almost a decade. I actually catered my own daughter's christening with her last spring. She's exceptional." I watched my own name move across that table like a stone skipped over water, touching down once, twice, and sinking without a single ripple reaching the people who should have recognized it. Felicity laughed, a short dismissive sound. "Well, thank God it's not actually my future daughter-in-law's mother-in-law cooking. Can you imagine? I love Harriet, but there's a difference between a nice church potluck and an event like this." She said it right in front of me, right in front of Charlotte, who flushed pink and stared very hard at the binder. I felt something in my chest go cold and very, very still, not hurt, past hurt, into something else. The particular calm that comes right before you stop asking a question and start answering it instead. I said, "I'm sure whoever they hired knows what they're doing." My voice did not shake. I want you to know that. It did not shake at all. That night, I drove home along the causeway with the windows down, salt air thick enough to taste, and I thought about my mother, who raised 4 children on a mill worker's wage in a garden out back, who used to say that the women who talk down to you in a kitchen have usually never once been hungry in their lives. I am not a vengeful woman. I want that understood clearly, because what comes next could be mistaken for vengeance if you don't know me, and I'd rather you know me. What I did, when I got home, was open my laptop at Walt's table and pull up the Hargrove Vinson folder. I reviewed the contract. I reviewed the deposit. I reviewed the clause, standard in every Vinson provisions agreement, that the chef owner reserves the right to be present and acknowledged at any event she personally oversees. I had never once invoked that clause. In 11 years, not once. I closed the laptop. I made a cup of tea I didn't drink, and I went to bed without deciding anything, because some decisions need to sit overnight before you trust them, the way bread dough needs its rest before you can shape it into something that'll hold. April moved fast, the way the last stretch before any large event always does. Fittings finalized, flowers ordered, the calligrapher chasing down 300 addresses that kept shifting because somebody's cousin got divorced, and somebody else's college roommate had a baby and needed the seating reshuffled around a high chair. I kept working. I kept showing up to family things, a shower at the country club, a golf outing where the men disappeared for 4 hours and the women sat on a veranda drinking rosé that was, frankly, too sweet, and listening to Felicity describe, in increasing detail, the caterer she'd discovered. Renata says she's done events for 2 senators, Felicity told the table, like she was reciting a resume she'd memorized for pleasure. Apparently, there's a 3-month wait list now. We got incredibly lucky with the timing. What's the menu like? Someone asked, a cousin of Charlotte's, sunburned and pleasant, genuinely curious. Oh, it's extraordinary. Some kind of she-crab soup that's apparently legendary. Brown butter scallops. And there's this little cornbread thing she does with sorghum butter that Renata says people request by name. I sat with my rosé sweating in my hand and listened to a woman describe my own cornbread, my mother's recipe, the one I taught myself to scale from a single iron skillet to 400 portions, as though she had personally unearthed a treasure nobody else had the taste to find. It sounds incredible, I said. Doesn't it? Felicity beamed. Honestly, it's everything I wanted for Charlotte. Real Southern food, but elevated, not... And here she did the thing again. The small dismissive wave of a manicured hand, not heavy, not home-style. The cousin, sunburned and pleasant, looked at me with something like sympathy, because even she seemed to sense that home-style, spoken in that kitchen, in that tone, had become a small knife Felicity kept sharpening without noticing whose direction it pointed. I smiled. I said the scallops sounded wonderful. I did not tell her I'd written that recipe in 2011 on the back of a hospital cafeteria schedule, the week Walt's first round of chemo started, because I needed something in my hands that wasn't fear. Here's the thing about a card you're holding. The longer you hold it, the heavier it gets. Not because the card changes, but because you do. Every week I sat in those rooms and let Felicity praise food she didn't know was mine. The weight shifted from anger into something more like clarity. I stopped wanting to prove anything. I started simply waiting for the moment the truth would be more useful spoken than kept. I'll tell you when that moment came. But first, I need to tell you about the day everything tipped. The day the disrespect stopped living in my chest and started living on paper, in an actual document, with an actual signature, where I could point to it later and say, there, that's the line, that's where it happened. It was the 2nd week of April, a Tuesday, and Renata called to go over final logistics, load-in times, generator placement, the usual choreography of a 500-guest event. Somewhere in the conversation she mentioned, almost as an aside, that the family wanted a printed menu card at each place setting, and that Felicity had asked to review the language before it went to the printer. She wants final say on how it's worded, Renata said. Some clients like to add a little flourish, curated by, that kind of thing. I asked to see a draft before it went out. Standard practice, I told her. I always like to confirm my own dishes are described correctly. The draft arrived in my inbox that evening. Renata had not told Felicity I'd asked to see it. Only that final menu language needed sign-off, and Felicity had taken to providing that sign-off with enthusiasm. I opened the document at Walt's table. Reading lamp on, the rest of the kitchen dark, the particular hush of a house at 9 at night when the only sound is the refrigerator's low hum and your own breathing. The menu card read beautifully. My she-crab soup, my scallops, my cornbread, my whole bone-deep low-country menu, each dish described in the kind of language that costs real money to write. Evocative, specific, the food made to sound like inheritance. And at the bottom, in small italic script, menu curated exclusively for the Hargrove Caraway wedding by Magnolia Table Catering, under the personal direction of Felicity Hargrove. I read it 3 times. Magnolia Table Catering does not exist. There is no such company. There never has been. Felicity had, somewhere in the last several weeks, simply decided that the menu, my menu, built dish by dish over a decade, recipes that came out of grief and rent payments, and a dry cleaner's kitchen above Carteret Street, belonged to her taste, her vision, her hand. She had not stolen my company's name. That would have been easy to fight, almost funny in its cleanliness. She had done something subtler and, I think, in its way, worse. She had erased it, replaced 11 years of my work with a phrase that made it sound like her own discernment, had conjured these dishes out of nothing but good breeding and a fine eye. I sat very still for a long time. Then I picked up the phone and called Renata. "There's an error on the menu card," I said. My voice was even. I had practiced, somewhere in the silence of reading it 3 times, exactly how even I wanted it to sound. "The vendor credit line is incorrect." "Oh, is it misspelled? I can fix it tonight." "It's not misspelled," I said. "It's wrong. There's no such company as Magnolia Table Catering. I'd like the credit line corrected to read Vincent Provisions, as per our contract." There was a pause on the line. I could hear Renata, 11 years of professional instinct working faster than her voice could keep up. "Harriet," she said slowly, "is there something going on I should know about?" "There's something going on you're about to know about," I said. "But for tonight, I just need the menu corrected. Contractually, my company's name needs to appear. You know that's standard." "It is," she said. "I'll fix it tomorrow." I hung up the phone. I sat at Walt's table until past midnight, the reading lamp throwing one small circle of light onto the oak, and I thought, this is the line. Not the dress shop, not the golf outing. This, a piece of paper with my work and another woman's name on it. This is the line. I had been patient. I am, by nature, and by trade, a patient woman. You cannot run 41 employees and 3 kitchens without the kind of patience that outlasts other people's certainty. But patience has a floor. Mine had just found it. I want to tell you something small here, a detail that doesn't fit the shape of a confrontation story but matters anyway, because I promised you the truth, and not just the satisfying parts of it. 2 days after the menu card incident, Felicity called me. Not Renata's office, not a group text. Felicity directly. At 8 in the evening, her voice different than I'd heard it before. Smaller. "Harriet, I wanted to apologize," she said, and I could hear, underneath the words, something that sounded almost like fear. "Renata told me there was an issue with the menu credit. I want you to know I didn't do that to slight you. I wanted something that felt like it was mine, too, something I'd contributed. Everyone keeps saying this is Charlotte's day, and her father isn't here to walk her down the aisle, and I just wanted to feel like I'd built something for her. Does that make sense?" It did make sense. I want to be honest with you. It landed somewhere true in me, that confession. Thomas Hargrove died 11 years ago, the same year I built my second kitchen, and I know something about wanting to construct meaning out of grief, because the alternative is sitting still inside it. It makes sense, I told her, but it isn't your name to put on someone else's work. "I know that now," she said. "I'll fix it properly." She did fix it. The corrected menu cards arrived a week later with Vincent Provisions printed clean and simple at the bottom. No flourish, no false claim. It was, I think, the most honest thing Felicity Hargrove did in the entire 6 months I knew her before the wedding. I tell you this not to soften what comes later. I tell you this because she is a person, not a villain in a story, and people are allowed one true moment even in the middle of behaving badly. It doesn't undo what she said in that dressing room. It also isn't nothing. But she still didn't know my name was the name on the contract. That part, she'd find out in June. Here is the part I think about more than almost anything else in this whole stretch of months. The moment the menu cards came back corrected, properly worded, my company's name sitting right there in clean type. And nobody noticed. Not Dean, not Charlotte, not Felicity, who had read the corrected version and approved it, without, apparently, letting the words Vincent Provisions connect to the woman she called Harriet at every family dinner. The human mind is a remarkable instrument for not seeing what it has already decided isn't there. I held that knowledge through May like a coal banked under ash, warm, contained, waiting on air. May brought the bridal shower, the bachelorette weekend I wasn't invited to, and didn't expect to be. I am 68, not delusional. And the final walkthrough of the venue, a sprawling property on Wadmalaw Island with a tenth the size of a small church and a dock that ran 200 feet out into water the color of strong tea. I attended the walkthrough as family. Renata walked the property with her clipboard, gesturing toward where the bar would go, the dance floor, the place where the cake, a 5-tier confection from a bakery in Mount Pleasant, would stand catching the last light before sunset. And catering staging will be here, Renata said, pointing toward a service tent set discreetly behind a stand of live oaks. Vincent Provisions will have their full team on site starting at 10 a.m. How many staff does she bring? Charlotte asked. It was, I noted, the first time anyone had asked a real question about the woman doing the actual labor of feeding 500 people. 18. For an event this size, Renata said. Harriet runs a tight operation. You won't see a single thing go wrong. I've never had a Vincent event run late. Felicity, standing a few feet away in linen the color of unbleached flour, said, I do hope she's prepared for a crowd like this. It's not exactly a backyard barbecue. I stood beside Charlotte's grandmother, an old woman named Eula, who had taken a liking to me over the months, mostly, I think, because I was the only other person at these events who didn't perform enthusiasm she didn't feel. Eula leaned toward me and said, low, just for the two of us. That woman's never thrown a dinner party in her life that wasn't catered by somebody else's hands. Funny how she talks about food like she invented hunger. I laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of me. And Eula patted my arm with a hand soft as worn cotton, and for the first time in 7 months, I felt something other than the cold, careful patience I'd been carrying. I felt almost ready. There is a particular kind of quiet that settles over you in the final weeks, before a thing you've been carrying finally comes due. Not anxiety exactly. More like the stillness before you pull bread out of the oven. You know it's ready because of the smell, that deep toasted sweetness that fills the whole house, and you know that the next motion, however careful, is going to change everything about the shape of what you've made. I spent the first week of June in my Ashley River kitchen the way I spend every week before a major event, testing batches, adjusting seasoning by half teaspoons, standing over a pot of she-crab soup at 11 at night because the sherry needed exactly 4 more minutes to bloom before I added the cream. My staff knew, by then, that this wedding was different, not because I'd told them everything. I hadn't, not yet, but because I am not, by nature, a woman who hums while she cooks, and I'd been humming for a week straight. My sous chef, a sharp young woman named Priya who has worked beside me for 6 years and reads me better than my own son does, finally asked on the Wednesday before the wedding, Harriet, what aren't you telling me? I told her the whole thing. Standing over that pot, sherry's steam curling up between us, I told her about the dress shop door, the menu card, the word homestyle worn smooth from overuse. Priya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, So what's the plan? You walk in there Saturday and just let it happen? I let it happen, I said, because it's already happened. What I'm deciding now is how it ends. And how does it end? I stirred the soup. 4 more minutes for the sherry. I have never once rushed that step, not in 11 years, and I wasn't going to start now, not even for the biggest reveal of my professional life. Quietly, I said. It ends quietly. That's the only way it means anything. The morning of the wedding, I woke at 4:30. the way I always do before a major event, and I drove to the Ashley River kitchen in the dark. Salt marsh smell thick through the cracked window, the radio off, just the hum of tires on the causeway, and my own thoughts keeping time. By 6, my kitchen was full. 18 staff, 4 delivery vans, sheet pans stacked to the ceiling, the specific clatter and shout of a professional kitchen running at full capacity. Somebody calling out, "Behind!" Every few seconds, the deep fryer's low roar. Priya barking temperatures at the line like a drill sergeant, who happens to also be extremely kind. I worked the line myself for the first 2 hours, the way I always do. Hands deep in work I love, garlic and butter, and the particular sound of a knife finding its rhythm against a cutting board. Tap, 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 tap. Steady as a heartbeat. At 9, I changed into my black jacket. Vincent stitched small over the left breast, and rode out to Wadmalaw Island in the second van, watching the marsh blur past gold and green in the early light, thinking about Walt, about how he used to stand in the kitchen doorway on big event mornings and say, "You've got this, Harry," like he had never once doubted it. I arrived at the venue at 10, the Hargrove Caraway wedding of Charlotte Hargrove and Dean Caraway was 4 hours from beginning. The ceremony itself I watched from a discreet distance, the way I always watch the ceremonies I cater, standing near the staging tent in my black jacket close enough to see, far enough to remain what I'd become for the day. Staff, invisible in the specific way that competent women in service uniforms are invisible to people who have never had to wear one. Dean looked exactly like Walt looked the day I married him. Same nervous hands, same way of swallowing hard before he speaks like the words have to clear something on their way out. Charlotte walked down an aisle scattered with magnolia petals on her uncle's arm, since her father couldn't, and I watched my son's face when he saw her, and I thought, whatever happens today, that part is real. That part I will not let anything touch. The vows were short, well chosen, slightly funny in the way good vows are. Felicity sat in the front row in pale blue silk, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief I happened to know, because I'd helped pack the welcome bags, had her late husband Thomas's monogram stitched into the corner. I want you to know I noticed that. I want you to know that even mid-betrayal, even holding the card I was about to play, I noticed the small true things, because a person is never only the worst thing they've said to you. By 6 o'clock, the ceremony had given way to cocktail hour, and my kitchen moved into its second gear. The quiet, relentless choreography of feeding 500 people without a single guest ever seeing the machine that makes it look effortless. I worked the edge of the reception in my black jacket, expediting plates, tasting sauces, doing the 1,000 invisible things a chef-owner does at her biggest event of the year. Guests drifted past me, without a flicker of recognition. I had been for 7 months Harriet, Dean's mother. Isn't she sweet at every family function? Tonight, in this jacket, under these string lights, I was simply staff. Nobody looks twice at staff. Felicity found her way to the edge of my kitchen tent around 8, flushed with champagne and genuine happiness, the particular looseness of a woman whose daughter has just married well, and whose party is, by any measure, succeeding. She didn't recognize me at first. I was 12 feet away, plaiting scallops under string lights, my hair different than she'd ever seen it, pinned back tight under a service cap. The soft waves she knew from family dinners gone entirely. She turned to the friend beside her, a woman I didn't know, silk dress, diamond the size of a hazelnut, and said the words I'd been waiting 7 months to hear her say in exactly this context. This caterer is extraordinary. Best money we've ever spent. Whoever she is, she should be running restaurants instead of doing weddings. The friend said something about the scallops, the brown butter, asking if anyone knew the chef's name. Vincent, Felicity said. Some woman named Vincent. Renata swears by her. I'm going to write the most glowing review of my life. I set down a plate. I did not look up immediately. I let the moment hold the shape it had earned. 12 feet of distance, 1 black jacket, 1 name spoken correctly for the first time in 7 months by a woman who still didn't know whose name it was. Then I looked up. Felicity's face did something I will remember for the rest of my life, and I want to describe it carefully, because it was not shock exactly, and it was not anger exactly. It was the particular total stillness of a person watching 2 pictures that don't belong together suddenly become 1 picture. Harriet? I untied my apron. Slow, unhurried, the way you take off something you've earned the right to wear. Hello, Felicity. You're... She looked at my jacket, at the small embroidered letters over my heart. Vinson. You're the caterer? I'm the chef-owner of Vinson Provisions, I said. Yes. I watched her run the math, fast, the way you do when a structure you've been standing on for months suddenly reveals itself to be built on something else entirely. The dress shop, pimento cheese, so homemade, the menu card with her own name on it, the one she'd had corrected. Corrected she must have understood in that instant, because someone had called and demanded it, someone whose name was on the contract. I don't understand, she said, and her voice had lost its champagne looseness entirely. When did you... How long have you... Since November, I said. Renata booked me in November. I didn't know it was Dean's wedding until I saw the seating chart in December. By then, the contract was signed. You let me... She stopped, started again. You sat in my kitchen. You let me say... I let you say a great many things, Felicity. My voice did not rise. I want you to understand that clearly, because the whole shape of this moment depends on you understanding it. I did not raise my voice once. Not that night, not ever, in the entire arc of this story. The power was never in volume. It never needed to be. I let you say I should just be a guest. I let you say homestyle like it was something to apologize for. I let you put another company's name on my menu cards until I corrected it myself. That was a mistake. I told you that was... I know, I said. And I accepted that apology. This isn't about the menu cards. A small crowd had begun, without quite meaning to notice that something was happening at the edge of the kitchen tent. Renata appeared first, drawn by some instinct planners, developed for trouble, her face doing a complicated thing as she took in the scene. Felicity, pale, me, untied apron in hand, the gap between us closing slowly as understanding did its work. Harriet, Renata said carefully, is everything all right? Everything's fine, I said. I was just explaining to Felicity that Vinson Provisions has been hers for 7 months. She just learned my name. Dean found us next. I watched him cross the lawn in his rented tux. Jacket already off, sleeves rolled. The particular loose-limbed happiness of a man who has just married well and intends to dance until his feet give out. And I watched that happiness slow, then stop, as he read his mother's face and then mine. Mom? He looked at the jacket, at the embroidery. What's going on? I catered your wedding, Dean, I said. I let it sit. I did not soften it, did not rush to explain, did not do the thing I have done his whole life, which is smooth the path before he has to walk it himself. I let the sentence exist in the air between us, complete and unadorned, the way Walt used to say a true thing only needs saying once, if you say it plainly enough. Dean looked at me, then at the scallops on the nearest tray, brown butter pooling gold under string lights, then back at me. The food everyone's been... He stopped. I watched him do the same math his mother had just done, except faster, except with the particular speed of a son realizing what he'd actually said to his mother 7 months earlier in a kitchen on Trad Street, and what it had cost. You've been here all day, he said slowly. You made all of this. I've run this kitchen for 11 years, I said. I made your she-crab soup recipe in 2011. I wrote your cornbread in a hospital cafeteria while your father was getting chemo. I have been doing real catering, Dean, since before you were old enough to know what the word meant. I am told my voice did not shake, even then. People have asked me since. I tell them the truth. It didn't need to. Felicity sat down, actually sat, in a folding chair near the kitchen tent meant for staff breaks, the silk of her dress pooling around her like she'd simply lost the structural will to remain standing. I told everyone, she said, mostly to herself. I told everyone we found the best caterer in the county. You did, I said. I told them she should be running restaurants. You did that too. She looked up at me. And here is the part I want you to sit with, because it is the part that mattered most to me. More than the reveal, more than the watching her math catch up to itself. She looked up at me with something that wasn't quite shame and wasn't quite fear, something closer to the particular exhausted clarity of a person who has just been handed proof of something she'd suspected about herself and didn't want confirmed. I was wrong about you, she said, not just about tonight. I was wrong about the whole shape of you. I thought I knew what kind of woman you were. You knew the shape I let you see, I said. That's not the same thing as knowing me. I didn't say it unkindly. I want that understood. There was no triumph in my voice, no performance for the small crowd that had gathered, drawn by the particular gravity a confrontation creates even when it's conducted at this volume, this calm. I said it the way you'd state a fact about weather or tide tables, with a precise temperature at which butter browns instead of burns. The best in the county, I added, mostly for myself. You hired the best in the county to replace me at my own son's wedding. The best in the county was me. Renata, to her enormous credit, did the thing good planners do in moments like this. She managed the room without anyone quite noticing they were being managed. Within 90 seconds, the small gathered crowd had been gently redirected toward the dance floor, where the band, paid in advance, professionally indifferent to family drama, had launched into something upbeat enough to pull attention. Charlotte arrived last, breathless, having heard some fragment of the commotion secondhand from a cousin. She looked between her mother, sitting small in a folding chair, and me, standing in my apron and my jacket, and her face did something I hadn't expected. It settled, not shocked, settled, like a piece finding the slot it was always meant to occupy. You're Vincent Provisions, she said, not a question. I am. I looked you up in December, she said. When I saw the contract had your name on it, I thought it might be a coincidence. Common enough name. I felt something shift in my chest. Surprise. Real surprise. The first I'd felt all night. You knew? I suspected. I didn't say anything because she glanced at her mother, then back at me, and something passed across her face that looked almost like an apology she didn't yet have words for. Because I didn't know what it would mean if I was right, and because some part of me wanted to see what you'd do with it. I almost laughed. There it was, my own instinct, the one I hadn't told anyone about, the quiet decision to let a thing unfold and see its true shape, living in this 26-year-old woman who'd just married my son. Blood tells sometimes, even when it isn't blood at all. What I did with it, I said, was make your wedding the best catered event in this county's recent memory. Ask anyone here tonight. They're already asking, Charlotte said, and for the first time in 7 months, she smiled at me like she meant it completely. Dean walked me away from the tent a few minutes later, his hand light on my elbow, the way he used to take my arm crossing a parking lot when he was small enough that the gesture went the other direction. We stood near the dock, 200 feet of weathered planking running out into water, gone the color of plum at this hour, the band's music thinning to a hum behind us. I said it would embarrass the wedding, he said. He wasn't looking at me. Cowards look away from the truth they're telling. I'd taught him that lesson myself, just not on purpose. You're cooking. I said, I remember what you said, Dean. I'm sorry. His voice cracked on the word, just slightly, just enough that I heard the boy underneath the man. I let her talk, and I went along with it because it was easier than arguing with her, and I told myself it didn't matter, it was just food, but it was never just food, was it? It was never just food. With you. No, I said. It wasn't. He was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the dark water, and I let him sit in it, the way I'd let his mother sit in her folding chair, not unkindly, but without rushing to make it easier than it needed to be. Why didn't you tell me? He finally asked. When you found out it was my wedding, why didn't you just call and say, hey, that caterer everyone's so excited about, that's me? I thought about the honest answer for a moment before I gave it to him, because he deserved the honest one, even the part that didn't flatter me. Because I wanted to know what you'd say about me when you thought I had nothing to do with it, I said. And I think some part of me already knew, and I needed to hear it confirmed before I could let it go. That's not fair, he said, but there wasn't much heat in it. No, I agreed. It wasn't entirely fair, I own that. But Dean, I've spent 11 years building something real with my own 2 hands, in a kitchen above a dry cleaners that didn't even have proper ventilation the first 2 years, and I have never once needed you or your mother-in-law to validate that it was good. I needed, just this once, to watch it prove itself in a room, that had already decided it couldn't. He nodded slowly. Out on the water, something, a fish, a bird settling, broke the surface and rippled outward, and we both watched it without saying anything for a while. The particular comfortable silence of two people who have said the hard thing and don't need to say it twice. The scallops were really good, he finally said. I laughed, really laughed, the kind that comes up out of you before you decide to let it. And he laughed too, and for a moment it was simple again, the way things are simple between a mother and a son who have just told each other something true. I am going to tell you what happened in the weeks after, because I think you've earned the full shape of it, not just the moment under the string lights. Felicity called me 3 days after the wedding. Not Dean's house, not Charlotte. Me, directly, the way she had once before, when the menu cards needed correcting. Her voice had none of the linen and quartz polish I'd grown used to over 7 months. It sounded for the first time like a woman closer to my own age than I'd let myself notice. I owe you an apology, she said. A real one, not the kind I gave you about the menu cards. I'm listening. I spent 11 years since Thomas died trying to prove I could still run things. The business, the house, Charlotte's whole life, really, without anyone deciding I needed managing. And somewhere in that, I think I started believing that the only way to prove I was capable was to make sure everyone around me looked less capable than I was. Including you. Especially you, maybe, because you'd actually built something and I'd just inherited something and tried very hard not to lose it. I sat with that for a moment at Walt's table, morning light coming in low and gold across the oak. I don't need an apology to feel like I won something, Felicity, I said. I never needed you to lose for me to know what I'd built was real. I know that now, she said. I think that's actually what unsettled me most. You never once needed me to validate you. I've spent my whole life needing exactly that from everyone, and I didn't know what to do with a woman who simply didn't. It was, I think, the most honest thing she ever said to me. I don't know that we became friends, exactly. Some bridges, once burned a little, hold a permanent scorch mark even after they're repaired well enough to cross. But she sent a card in July, handwritten, no flourish, thanking me properly for the wedding, and she has referred 2 clients to Vincent Provisions since, including her own sister Marguerite's 60th birthday, which I catered in September with a menu Felicity helped choose, this time with her own name nowhere on the credit line. Renata, for her part, never apologized, because there was nothing for her to apologize for. She had simply done her job, booked her best vendor, and trusted the rest of us to sort out the rest of it like adults. I have catered 6 more events for her since June. She told me, over coffee in August, that the Hargrove Caraway wedding remains the most requested reference in her portfolio, and that 3 separate brides have called specifically asking for the caterer from the Hargrove wedding, the one everyone's still talking about. I told her to send them my way. She already had. Here is the part where I tell you what I actually think this story is about, because I promised you the truth, and the truth is rarely as clean as the moment under the string lights makes it look. This was never about the food. The food was good because I am good at what I do, and I have been good at it for 11 years through grief and rent, and an oven that runs 11 degrees hot. The food was just the proof, the part you could taste and measure and praise without knowing whose hands had made it. What this was actually about was a room full of people who believed that love is a budget line, something you manage, allocate, protect from embarrassment, the way you'd protect an investment from a bad quarter. And I have spent my whole life believing something different. I believe love is something you build with a paper trail, a contract, a recipe written down so carefully someone else could follow it after you're gone, a table built from salvaged oak that holds a grudge if you rush it, but holds you too, for 20 years and longer, long after the man who built it stopped being able to sit at it himself. Felicity thought she held the power in that family, because she held the checkbook, the venue, the final say on menu language. I let her believe that for 7 months, not because I needed her to be wrong, but because I have learned, across 68 years, in one company built from nothing, that being right is not something you have to announce. It simply waits, patient as bread dough, until the room is ready to taste it. They hired the best caterer in the county to spare themselves the embarrassment of mine. The best caterer in the county had been mine the entire time. I still drive out to the Ashley River kitchen most mornings before 5, the marsh thick with that low salt smell, the radio off, my own thoughts keeping time against the hum of tires on the causeway. I still eat breakfast at Walt's table, the worn patch on his chair catching morning light the same way it has for 7 years now. I still fold a dish towel in half, and then in half again when my hands need something to do besides what they want to do. Dean and Charlotte come for Sunday dinner most weeks now. He doesn't look away anymore when he tells me something true. That, I think, is the part that matters most. More than the scallops, more than the string lights, more than the particular stillness on Felicity's face when she finally understood whose name had been on her menu cards all along. People ask me sometimes, when they hear this story at the events I still cater every single week, whether I forgive my son for what he said in that kitchen on Trad Street. I tell them forgiveness was never really the question. He was wrong, and he knew he was wrong before I ever had to prove it to him, and the proving was never really for his benefit anyway. It was for mine. I built a company out of a rented kitchen and a casserole nobody asked me to bring, and not one person in that family ever needed to know my name for the work to be real. They learned it anyway. That part was never really up to me. What was up to me, the only thing that was ever fully mine to decide, was whether I'd spend the rest of my life waiting for people to recognize what I'd built, or simply keep building it, quietly, correctly, with my name stitched small over my heart, until the day the truth walked itself into the room and sat down at the table without needing my permission to stay. I chose the second thing. I have never once regretted it. And if you take nothing else from this story, take this. You do not need the loudest voice in the room to hold the most power in it. Sometimes the quietest woman at the table is the one who built the table. Sometimes she is the one who catered the wedding under a name nobody bothered to ask about until it was too late to matter. Sometimes she just keeps folding the towel and waits for the room to catch up to what she already knows. I am still here. The kitchen is still mine. And the next time someone tells me my cooking might embarrass them, I will say, thank you, exactly the way I always have. And I will already know something they don't. That has never once failed me yet.